are building. So it is that backbone of what we need to do to build. But we're also incorporating those other pieces as well that are very important in that process as we go forward. Now, you're actually, or your clients, and you can use this as well. And so it's always good. You can go on there and do a refresher or practice as well as a provider, as a professional. But remember, they're having the ability in play attention to experience attention. Attention is a very abstract idea. We generally can't touch it, we can't see it, but it's so very important in everything we do, especially with that executive function. Think about, if you've forgotten where you've left something, right? We've all misplaced our keys or our cell phone. And oftentimes we misplace those things because we're not fully attentive, right? We've lost that attention. We're not focused and paying attention. So we're setting that object down and then we're going off to do something else. And when it comes time to find that those keys or that cell phone, we can't remember where it's at. So what we need is that attention. We need that piece of the puzzle. We need to be able to experience. We need to be able to practice it. And this is one thing that we talk about a lot when you're working with individuals that have ADHD. If they're diagnosed with that, it's really a misnomer that there's a deficit of attention, because your ADHD clients can pay attention as long as something's fun and exciting and interesting and they're passionate about it. You almost have that hyper focus. But then in that other environment, whether it's school, whether it's a work project, whether it's doing housework around the house, it's very hard for them to stay engaged. They're unable to experience that attention in that environment. And that's what we want to build for them. We're using the cognitive training and that body wave armband to give individuals that ability to experience that attention. Have that deliberate practice. They're actually realizing in the first few seconds, they really can pay attention, because many of them have been told, well, you just can't pay attention. Why can't you just pay attention? And this gives them that experience right off the bat that they're actually able to pay attention. Now, they're probably struggling to sustain that attention, but that's okay. That's what we're going to help build them, build their skill of. Now, we're using that experience and we're using that body wave armband to give them feedback of attention, but we're going to use it in conjunction with our cognitive exercises necessary to build executive function. So there's more than just attention that we need to do here. We need to work on a lot of different areas. Now, here's another great piece about play attention is that we are able to customize this program for different individuals, right? So not everybody, in looking at the screen here, not everybody might need social skills, right? Sometimes you work with individuals that are really, really social. They love that social interaction. They thrive off that social interaction. They do really well in that, but they really struggle to do things in sequence, right? If you give them directions, they really, really have a hard time following those instructions. Maybe you have somebody that does a little bit better at following the instructions. They really struggle in that social environment, right? And I think that's the important thing to remember here, because not only are we working with a wide variety of individuals and potential diagnoses or no diagnosis, because the diagnosis is not required to use play attention. Since we are focusing on that executive function, we really want a program that's not a one size fits all, something that can be customizable, something that can work with everyone. Now, remember, when we're talking about the clientele base, we do recommend that there are at least 5 to get started, but working well into adulthood is still very effective. We work with individuals here at our office in their 80s and their 90s, because we do know as we get a little bit older, we do have a tendency to lose some of that cognitive skill. And so the aging population is still a great population, because with our neuroplasticity in our brains are moldable and shapeable, and we can always learn new skills if we're given the right tools. And that's what we're doing here as we go along. Now, we want to make sure that you know of all of the cognitive exercises that we have available, because that would be one way to offer more to your client. Maybe you just started with our foundational courses, which are the first 6 that you see here, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And now you're ready to expand and offer more customization, because the first 6 that you see here are really our foundations of executive function. They're building that strong foundation, but the other six that you see, and there's actually a couple more that aren't pictured on the screen that we're going to talk about, are more like our master class, where they're putting a lot more customization into a client's profile. And again, like not everybody needs social skills. So that giving them someone that really needs it, that customization is going to be really important as we move forward. So let's talk a little bit first about your foundations of executive function. This is what comes with all of our programs, all of our professional program systems come with these first 6 games. And what we're doing in these first 6 games, again, are building that foundation for the client. We're working on attention stamina, right? Learning to sustain our attention at will. So if you have somebody, and really that's like our cornerstone game. Most individuals can benefit from this because even individuals that don't feel like they have an attention difficulty, with the way information is provided to us now in such a fast-paced way with technology, that attention span is getting smaller and smaller. And so that is a really good way to help build that attention span for them, because we're learning to sustain that attention in more of that mundane environment, right? Because again, remember, most individuals, if then something's fun and exciting and they're passionate about it, they can pay attention to that. It's that opposite environment. And that's what we want to build for them. We can work on visual tracking. That helps us track a moving object. So if you have a client come in or a parent come in with their child and say, I'm getting lots of notes home from school where when, the teacher is discussing what's going on, my child is everywhere. They're paying attention to all of the things, except they don't know what the teacher's talking about. So a really great example of that would be oftentimes if a teacher is near us, we can usually pay attention to them, but if they start moving around the classroom, all of a sudden we have that diffused attention. Our attention, it's not that we have a deficit, our attention's everywhere. Because all of these things now are coming into our peripheral. So now we can say, oh, I know what's happening outside the window. I know what my neighbor's doing. I know that the air conditioning vent came on. And this really helps us build that ability to filter out those distractions, as well as build that ability to track that moving object. Time on task, this is a great one. This is really usually something that's very necessary for adults. It's very important for children, but we see it a lot with adults. It's, I start a million tasks and I don't finish any of them. Or I'm a huge procrastinator. I can't get started. It's very, very hard. And this happens sometimes too. We hear this from parents is, my child has a worksheet that should take us about 30 minutes and it's taking us 2 hours and we're still not getting to the end of it. So we need to be able to get those tasks done in the appropriate amount of time. So that time on task is really effective across the board to help us with that time management. Short-term memory, the name pretty much says it, facts, figures, things that have just happened. But another thing that short-term memory can help us with is multi-step instructions. So I mentioned that a little bit earlier, I touched on that. And that's very common if you are working with someone that has a hard time going from A to B to C to D, or you have a parent say, I tell them to go upstairs and put their pajamas on and brush their teeth and grab a book, and I come up there and they haven't done any of it. It can often mean we need to strengthen that short-term memory. Discriminatory processing is helping us quickly filter information. This is another gray area if you're working with someone that has a diagnosis as well of ADHD, because it can often feel like a fire hose of information coming in, right? They're taking in so much. How do they know, yes, I need this, no, I don't need that, and then being able to quickly make decisions. And so it allows us to do that. And then our academic bridge is just a really great tool because it helps with that transfer and generalization. Because we have to have that. We can't just play a game and then boom, it's there. We have to practice these skills in real life. And we're going to talk a little bit more about academic bridge because it is something that you should be incorporating into your client's program. Now, when we talk about the masterclass, so these are the other exercises that are available, and some of them you may not be aware of. You may have all of them, and so we're going to touch on these because this, again, is a great way for you to offer more to your clients because you're giving them even more customization. So we have working memory. That is helping us with our problem solving and our critical thinking. So if you have a younger individual that struggles with math word problems, they struggle with comprehension, and even younger into older individuals that maybe say, I really have a hard time prioritizing things. I have a hard time organizing. I have a hard time, planning. It can all fit in that working memory. So that's an area that can be really helpful to build. It's a little bit higher level memory skill for individuals. Auditory processing, that's going to be the verbal information. So if you have an individual that if you write something down for them, awesome, they do a great job. But if you only give them instructions or information verbally, they really have a hard time remembering that. They can maybe do step 1, but they're missing step 2, 3, and 4. And that's going to work specifically giving them information and tasks to repeat verbally. Hand-eye coordination. So again, not everybody needs strong coordination. We work with a lot of athletes. They do fabulous with their coordination, but they're struggling with other areas. This could be where you do have somebody that really struggles with their coordination. And so hand-eye coordination is going to be that fine motor control, instrument playing, handwriting. So if someone really struggles with handwriting, it could be their hand-eye coordination. Social skills, I've talked a lot about that, but it's specifically looking at the nonverbal social cues, right? If we miss the look, if we miss the shake of the head, that can often affect our peer relationship. So it can help us build that area. Motor skills is another area of coordination we can work on. That's more of the mind-body connection, right? So more of how I move my body. So if I'm a little clumsier, I have a little bit of harder time, getting my body to function. I need to connect those two together. And so working on building that. Spatial memory helps us remember where we left things. So I mentioned earlier, we've all lost our phone, our keys, but some individuals, especially if they have high impulse, if they're a million miles an hour all of the time, sometimes they struggle with this because they set things down and they're somewhere else. And when that happens, they're not able to recall where that information is or where those things are at. And then they're losing a lot of items. This was a huge one. If you've listened to any of my webinars, you know that my kids have gone through the program. And for my son, he is 14 at the time. This was huge for us because he lost everything. I tell people if it wasn't attached to his body, he was losing it. And this was really great because it helped him slow down, it helped him strengthen that attention, and then it built that retention for him. So working on multiple things to really help with that skill. Mindfulness. Now, this is a new one. So some of you, if you've been with us for a while, you may not be familiar with our mindfulness game. It's actually called Lotus, and it works on building mindfulness. We know mindfulness is so very helpful. There's health benefits, whether it's physical, mental, whatever that is, there's benefits to it. But again, if we're struggling with attention, sustained attention, if we're struggling to quiet our mind, it could be hard to be in that mindful state. It's very hard to know, am I being mindful? Am I practicing this the correct way? Is it working? And so our Lotus game helps with that. Your character is actually in a yoga room, and I'm going to show you a picture here in just a second. But as you're focused and paying attention and in that mindful state, you're going to be able to slowly open those petals. There's a lotus flower in front of you, and that's giving you that experience, right? That attention, that mindfulness, you're getting that feedback that you are in that state. But just like with everything else, if we start to lose that, those petals start to close again, giving us that feedback, letting us know now we're no longer engaged, right? So practicing that deliberate practice. Then we also have first and second grade addition and subtraction math. Right now, we just have first and second grade. I know I've had individuals ask for older grades. That's something that's, on in our research and development. We're not there yet, but right now we have available first and second grade. So if you're working with individuals, if you're a tutor, if you're an educator, if you have individuals, younger individuals that are really struggling with math, this is a great addition to their training plan. And remember, every single one of those modules that I talked about, all of them are working on processing speed. So no matter what we put into somebody's profile, we're working on that processing speed. We're helping them with task switching. We're helping them control impulse, and we're helping them with distractors. And so remember, we have Sheer Genius built into the program, our artificial intelligence, and it helps determine the challenge that they need. Because remember, we want to customize it for each individual. I mean, these are modules that we're using again from 5 to 105, but we want them to be effective for each individual. And that sheer genius, our artificial intelligence, does that for us. And so it meets the individual where they're at, and then it starts to challenge them, because challenge is one of those catalysts that we need. We can't do the same thing over and over again. And so the way that that would work is somebody got in, they start doing their exercise, and then they do well, and automatically makes it a little harder for them. They meet that challenge, it'll make it a little bit harder again. But if they ever get to a challenge that's too difficult, it will bump it back down to that last level of success, even them out, and then start that process again, because we need to balance that success with that challenge. We have to have both. Can't just make it so hard that someone can't do it. We have to balance that out. Now, remember, as individuals hit certain benchmarks, right? So each level, and you can always go into your system admin and go into the different games and look, all this information is there. So advancement. So remember, each game has a bronze, silver, and gold level, and they advance, individuals advance through those different programs. Again, Sheer Genius is taking care of that for you. And there's certain benchmarks that they need to hit, like attention stamina. To go from bronze to silver, they need to play for at least 5 minutes, and they need to at least have 75% of attention or more. And they have to do that consecutively for 5 times. So when you have a new client, they're going to have to play a few times for Sheer Genius to start gathering their data and collecting that. And then if they play once, after that, if they play once and they hit that at least 5 minutes and that they have at least 75% of attention, remember, they get that star. If they go in again and they do it again, they get a second star. And remember, there's 5 stars, and once all 5 of those stars are lit up, then they will advance to that next level, and then there'll be new benchmarks. And then there's new things built into the program as they advance. Now, also remember, it has to be consecutive, meaning if someone goes in and hits those benchmarks once, and then they go in a second time, and maybe for whatever reason, they hit 60% of attention that day, they're going to lose the star from the first day. Because remember, we don't want to advance them until they're ready, because when we go to that next level, it is an advancement. We want them to be prepared. We want them to be ready. And so know that's there, know that's available, and that's something that's going to happen. And we talk with our home clients here and let them know that that is just a normal everyday part of life, that we're going to, as we start learning stuff, we're not going to learn everything right away. And it's just part of that process, and it's okay. And we'll get right back to there, because we know that they can do it. We just need to practice a little bit more for them to get to that. Now, here are those 2 graphics that I was mentioning earlier. So our addition and subtraction, first and second grade. So it's going to look something like this. There'll be a math problem on there, and then they'll have to be fully focused and paying attention for that math problem to come up. And then they'll have options on the side to choose the answer, and then they'll click next. At any time they lose that attention for any reason, it goes away. And then once they're re-engaged, we're bringing that back, because we have to have that attention experience as we're going through. Now, the other picture I have here is that lotus. And so it's showing the yoga teacher in the room, and then you can it's cut off just a little bit, the flower, the lotus flower that's there and that's available. And as you're fully focused and paying attention, you're opening that flower. And of course, if you lose that, the petals slowly start to close. So again, we're having that experience of what it's like to be in that environment, and then we're practicing it so that we can start to use it outside of play attention. So how do you know, okay? How do you decide, okay, I want this module, I don't want that module? Because remember, you are in complete control of their curriculum. You make the decision of what that curriculum looks like. Now, remember, we are working for an hour a week. We want them to hit that hour of training per week, but we need to break that hour up. Many of our professionals will break it up into 2 30-minute sessions. You have the opportunity to break it up into smaller sessions if they're coming in more often, or we'll talk about iLab, where you could do a virtual opportunity for them, and so they wouldn't have to come to the office as much. But you are in charge of that. Now, remember, when we're talking about play attention, this is not something that's going to be fixed overnight, right? If I'm training for even a 5K, let's say I've never ever ran before, I have, I've been doing walking, but I've never ran before, and I sign up for my first 5K. If I've never ran before and I sign up for my first 5K and it's 2 days away, it's going to be a rough 5K for me. I'm not going to do probably where I want to be. I'm probably going to do a lot of walking. I might be the last one coming through on the finish line. And so that's what we need to look at when we're talking about training our brain. It's not something that happens overnight. And that's something that we use here and we talk with clients, that kind of that client expectation, right? We need to have that commitment from them to go through this program, because you are going to start seeing results probably in about that first month, but they're not going to be huge. If I eat right and I exercise for 30 days, I'm going to start to see some changes, but they're not going to be huge. They're not going to be these gigantic changes. If I'm being consistent, they're going to be there. And that's really what you're seeing with play attention. Now, we don't want to jam it through either. We don't want to just, cram everything in over a shorter amount of time, because maybe they don't want to do the full, really 40 hours. We're talking about a commitment of about 10 months for someone. Now, if you have somebody that's, maybe severely on the spectrum, maybe they have an intellectual disability, not that they can't build these skills, it just might take them a little bit longer, just like some other skills might be for them. And so that might look a little bit different, but overall, the average that we see is about a 10-month. And so we don't want to just try to do that in a 4-month period or a 5-month period, because it's not going to be effective. We always want quality over quantity, and that's really what we need to emphasize. So generally speaking, when we're talking about setting up curriculum for our clients, we're looking at about 5 exercises. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't do more down the road, but again, we don't want to overwhelm the brain. We want to make sure we're getting enough of each of these skills